The frantic ringing of my phone at 3 in the morning usually means disaster. But nothing could prepare me for the terrified whisper of my only daughter begging for help before the line suddenly cut to static, driving like a madman toward the sprawling estate of her wealthy in-laws. My fear transformed into blinding rage when her smug mother-in-law blocked the driveway and sneered that my girl was going nowhere. I did not waste time arguing with old money snobs, so I threw my heavy-duty Ram truck into reverse and obliterated their expensive custom security gates in a shower of sparks and twisted metal. Sirens began to wail across the manicured lawns as the engine roared and the smell of shredded rubber filled the night air. But my calloused hands only gripped the steering wheel tighter as I stared at the mansion ahead. That massive palace was built on the backs of honest working men like me. Yet the monsters inside believed their bank accounts gave them the right to mistreat my flesh and blood. The front doors burst open, and the matriarch of the family, Evelyn Vance, stepped out onto the marble veranda wearing a flawless silk gown while casually swirling a glass of dark wine. She looked down her nose at me with pure disgust, claiming that my daughter was completely unhinged and sedated in bed where no subclass intruder was permitted to disturb her peace. When she ordered 3 burly security guards to physically drag me off the property, I simply locked eyes with her, backed the truck up 10 yards, and slammed my boot onto the accelerator. The massive steel bumper smashed through the final barricade with a deafening crunch that echoed through the valley, leaving my truck battered, but the path completely clear. The guards backed away in absolute terror when they saw the cold fury in my eyes as I stepped out of the cab and marched past them without uttering a single word, trusting a father's raw intuition. I sprinted up the grand staircase and kicked open the heavy door of the master bathroom only to find my poor child shivering on the freezing tile floor. Her face was entirely bloodless, and a discarded medical needle rolled across the floor next to her limp arm, proving that these wealthy psychopaths had forcefully drugged my brilliant girl into compliance. As I lifted her frail, weightless body into my arms, a profound and dangerous quiet took over my mind because the Vance family had no idea what a simple aborter was capable of when pushed to the edge. Evelyn stood in the hallway screaming about trespassing and long prison sentences, but I carried my daughter past her expensive perfume and internal rot without acknowledging her existence. Within minutes, blue and red police lights illuminated the entire courtyard as 4 patrol cars boxed my truck in and pointed a dozen firearms directly at my chest. A young deputy aggressively slammed my face against the boiling hood of my vehicle, ratcheting the metal handcuffs around my wrists until they cut into my skin, while the patriarch, Arthur Vance, watched with an arrogant smirk. He adjusted his designer shirt and told the corrupt local police chief that he wanted an old construction worker like me to rot behind bars for destroying his precious private property. They threw me into a freezing interrogation room at the central precinct where I sat in total silence for 3 agonizing hours, waiting patiently for the trap to spring. The door finally opened as Arthur strolled in alongside the bribed police chief, tossing a stack of inflated repair bills onto the table while laughing at my muddy boots and simple life. He threatened to use his massive transportation empire to strip away my parental rights and have my daughter permanently committed to a locked psychiatric asylum so she could never expose them. I raised my head and told him calmly that I did not spend 30 years building houses for elite thieves, but rather I was the lead contractor who built the very station we were sitting in. Arthur laughed at my words until the police chief's phone began ringing off the hook and the man's face drained of all color as a high-powered corporate attorney named Logan walked into the room. Logan opened a premium leather briefcase and produced a thick crimson ledger containing financial secrets that held the power to destroy the most prominent families in the city. Arthur sneered that a cheap lawyer and a manual laborer could never touch his multi-million-dollar enterprise, but my quiet voice cut through his arrogance when I ordered Logan to buy up every single cent of their corporate debt. The wealthy bully froze in disbelief as Logan began reading the grim reality that the Vance Group was secretly facing total bankruptcy and had mortgaged their entire estate to staying afloat. What Arthur never realized was that the anonymous shell corporations holding their massive banknotes actually belonged to me, an undercover logistics tycoon who preferred a modest life over flashy wealth. Within 5 minutes, I became the primary creditor of the entire Vance family, giving me the immediate legal authority to seize their home, their factories, and the very air they breathed. Arthur began trembling violently as his phone erupted with frantic calls from panicked shareholders, but I walked out of the precinct into the cold dawn where my private investigator, Vance, was waiting with a dark secret. He handed me a classified file revealing that the family plot against my daughter was not just about control, but rather about hiding a horrific criminal act that could put them away for life. It turned out their degenerate son had lost millions in bad cryptocurrency investments and owed a massive fortune to dangerous underground syndicates who were actively hunting him down. To save themselves, the parents discovered that my daughter had inherited an untouched piece of land worth $10 million from her late grandmother, so they systematically drugged her to claim legal guardianship over her assets. My hands shook with rage as I read how they trampled her mind for dirty money. So I instructed my team to prepare a special surprise for the High Society charity gala they were hosting that exact evening. Before leaving, Vance warned me that the chemical in the syringe was tied to a fatal hit and run accident on Route 9, a dark truth they were desperate to bury. That night, I traded my work clothes for a premium tailored tuxedo and walked into the grand ballroom of the 5-star hotel, completely stunning Evelyn when she tried to have me removed as a common vagrant. When an innocent young waitress accidentally spilled water on Evelyn's dress, the wicked woman slapped the poor girl across the face and called her worthless garbage in front of everyone. I stepped in to help the crying girl up just as the charity auction began for the Vance family heirloom sapphire, which had an opening bid of $100,000. I aggressively drove the price up to $400,000, winning the stunning gemstone before walking onto the stage to accept the velvet box under the shocked stares of the elite crowd. Instead of keeping it, I walked over to the abused waitress and placed the fortune into her trembling hands, announcing loudly that this was proper compensation for dealing with people who mistake wealth for actual class. Leaving the ruined couple standing in total humiliation, my phone buzzed with an urgent message that the family had secretly transferred my daughter to a notorious private asylum called St. Jude's. Using my financial leverage and connections in the Red Binder, I arrived at the gated asylum accompanied by state fire inspectors and health department officials to force an immediate emergency investigation of the premises. The panicked head doctor tried to block our entry with administrative excuses, but the inspectors quickly uncovered dozens of major violations, forcing him to hand over the keys to the isolated psychiatric ward. I broke into room 304 to find my beautiful girl chained to a rusted bed frame, looking pale and broken until she recognized my silhouette in the doorway. I unlocked her restraints, wrapped her in a heavy blanket, and carried her out past the useless guards into the back seat of my truck, where she finally began to weep as the sedatives were off. Pulling onto a dark shoulder under a deserted highway bridge, my daughter grabbed my sleeve and whispered the terrifying truth of what really happened during that stormy night on Route 9. Her husband had struck a pedestrian while driving drunk, and when his father arrived to cover up the crime, he brought along the corrupt local police chief to help bury the victim while the poor man